Well, good morning. Not quite afternoon here. I thought I'd pop in for a few minutes, but it's out just as well. Cigarettes are bad for me. Let's see. Is anybody coming in to listen live? Well, let's see. I have here this book, Combining and Creating by William L. Stoll. Sorry, I always cough in the morning. The copyright date on my copy is 1983. I used it in some of the classes I taught at Chapman University um, to help people learn to write better. So I'll begin with chapter 1 because it has a quote from one of my favorite authors, William Faulkner, and it's from my favorite book of his, The Sound and the Fury. And that sentence is Shreve was coming up the walk, shambling, fatly earnest, his glasses glinting beneath the running leaves like little pools. Now, this book breaks that down for you into 5 separate sentences, simple sentences. Shreve was coming up the walk. He was shambling. He was fatly earnest. His glasses were glinting beneath the running leaves. They were like little pools. Now, I don't know what running leaves are, but combining all 5 of these simple sentences into a cumulative sentence. Now, you could instead have 2 compound sentences, as in Shreve was fatly earnest, and he came shambling up the walk. His glasses were glinting beneath the running leaves, so they were like little pools. So the words and in the first sentence and so in the second sentence clue you in that there are 2 sentences combined into one. That's a compound sentence linked by a coordinator, such as and, but, for, or so. And there are other coordinators. They're called coordinating conjunctions. For grammar geeks, you have 2 independent clauses combined. So Shreve was fatly earnest is combined with he came shambling up the walk by saying Shreve was fatly earnest and he came shambling up the walk. And next, his glasses were glinting beneath the running leaves is combined with they were like little pools by saying his glasses were glinting beneath the running leaves, so they were like little pools. Now you could make complex sentences by combining them in a different way. Here's another version. As Shreve, who was fatly earnest, came shambling up the walk, his glasses were like little pools because they were glinting beneath the running leaves. That there is complex. I think you can feel that it's complex without thinking about it. Complex sentences include at least one independent clause, such as, they were glinting beneath the running leaves, or his glasses were like little pools, or Shreve, who was fatly earnest, came shambling up the walk. But the complex sentence also has one or more dependent clauses, clauses that cannot stand on their own. For example, as Shreve came shambling up the walk, it feels incomplete. And even as Shreve, who was fatly earnest, came shambling up the walk, it still feels incomplete. What's he doing? What's happening while he's shambling up the walk? And the last clause, because they were glinting beneath the running leaves, also sounds incomplete. This because needs to answer a question, why? Now, when people are just talking, it's perfectly all right to begin a sentence with because, but writing is different. That's a dependent clause when it begins with because. So we have, as Shreve, who was fatly earnest, came shambling up the walk, his glasses were like little pools because they were glinting beneath the running leaves. And now, cumulative. Cumulative sentences, as in the sentence that Faulkner wrote, are even more interesting to me. Shreve was coming up the walk, shambling, fatly earnest, his glasses glinting beneath the running leaves like little pools. The sentence is not compound because there's only one independent clause, Shreve was coming up the walk. And it is not complex because we don't have a subordinator or a relative. What the, what the, who's the? Well, a subordinator, such as or because, subordinates the dependent clause, makes it a subordinate clause. A, a relative pronoun, such as who, makes a relative clause. So when we say Shreve, who was fatly earnest, that's a relative phrase or a relative clause. Every clause is a phrase, not every phrase is a clause. Good morning, Oswald. Let me type in the chat room. I can't talk and type at the same time. The subordinate clause is introduced by because. They're both dependent, but they're different types of dependent clauses. So when Faulkner writes his sentence without as, without who, without because, this is cumulative. Shreve was coming up the walk, shambling, fatly earnest, his glasses glinting beneath the running leaves like little pools. It isn't compound, it has only one independent clause, At the same time, it is not complex because there's no subordinator like because and no relative like who. It's simple in its structure, but far from simple in its effect. Now, me personally, I would make one slight change to Faulkner's sentence. Instead of saying Shreve was coming up the walk, shambling, I would have written Shreve was shambling up the walk, fatly earnest, his glasses glinting beneath the running leaves like little pools. And I still don't know what running leaves are. Perhaps it's a windy day. But Faulkner has a great sentence anyway. Shreve was coming up the walk, shambling, fatly earnest, his glasses glinting beneath the running leaves like little pools. Now, this here book, I'm sure it's still available, even though mine is copyright 1983, combining and creating by William L. Stoll. It has exercises at the end of each chapter because it was written for students, but it also has the answers in the back of the book so you can check your own work. Yes, Oswald, it's stultifying. I highly recommend this book. I'm sure you can find it, if not in bookstores, then online in various places. The publisher was they've hidden it in tiny, tiny, tiny print. The Dryden, Holt Reinstart and Winston Inc., the Dryden Press, Saunders College Publishing. So Holt Reinhardt and Winston Press. I'm sure Holt Reinhardt still exists. They were one of the big ones. It has an introduction to the student and an introduction to the teacher, I think. Let's see. Oh, come on. Oh, a preface to the instructor and an introduction to the student. Now, this is all about ways to make your writing sparkle and shine in ways that don't necessarily happen um, easily or naturally. So it has a quote from Ernest Hemingway for chapter 2, Coordinating Connectives. Not my favorite author, but he's good enough. In the orchard bush, they found a herd of impala, and leaving the car, they stalked one old ram with long, wide-spreading horns, and Macomber killed it with a very credible shot that knocked the buck down at a good 200 yards and sent the herd off, bounding wildly and leaping over one another's backs in long, leg-drawn-up leaps as unbelievable and as floating as those one makes sometimes in dreams. And this is about the short, happy life of Francis Macomber. Well, it's from that. I believe this is the one where his wife accidentally shoots him dead. Accidentally, in quotes. You can hear the compound sentences happening with coordinating conjunctions. And. When the word and joins a couple of things in a list, it's simply a connecting uh, word. But when it joins whole sentences, it's a coordinating conjunction. And I can't say that word without thinking of Schoolhouse Rock, conjunction, junction, what's your function? The book breaks it down into simple sentences. In the orchard bush, they found a herd of impala. That doesn't mean a little bush like one plant. Bush is like brush, a whole bunch of acres of bushy stuff. Sentence number two, leaving the car, they stalked one old ram with long, wide spreading horns. And finally, Macomber killed it with a very credible shot that knocked the buck down at a good 200 yards and sent the herd off bounding wildly and leaping over one another's backs in long drawn up leaps as unbelievable and as floating as those one makes sometimes in dreams. Now, why is the word and not a coordinating conjunction here? Well, because it's just a list. Knocked the buck down and sent the herd off and leaping over one another's backs. It's a list, and as floating as those one makes. It's a list of adjectives, actually. The herd is bounding wildly. The herd is leaping over. The herd is as floating as. But Hemingway connects all these freaking clauses with and. I like Faulkner's work better, and this is one of the reasons. Hemingway, it's his journalistic style. He wrote for newspapers, but it's rather plain and pedestrian compared to Faulkner's shambling up the walk and running leaves. Faulkner is more poetic, and frankly, uh, not as successful as Hemingway, which to me seems a shame. Hemingway has as much poetry, the herd bounding wildly and leaping over one another's backs in long leg drawn up leaps. That's poetic as well as journalistic, but I might have gone this way. When they found a herd of impala, they left the car and stalked one old ram with long, wide spreading horns. Macomber killed it with a credible shot that knocked the buck down and sent the herd off, bounding wildly and leaping. Just my taste. Well, I think that's enough of a taste of this for now. I'm happy to have someone listening. Most of my listeners, of course, will end up on the, replay. That's okay. But I wanted to put up something for the 3 new listeners I got today and half a dozen over the past week. And check me out on Facebook. I have a subscription page called Writing Your Best. It's a Facebook subscriber group and it's only 99 cents a month. I have no members at all yet. Even if all you write is a letter to your mom or signing a birthday card for someone, you can write better. So check out my group and You can post and ask for advice. From time to time, I'll post there, but I'm hoping to get some questions from people. And 99 cents, I mean, you can't even get a cup of coffee for that anymore. So please check it out. That's on Facebook and it's called Writing Your Best. I got to get back to show prep for my Blog Talk Radio show, Ancient of Days. It's part of the Freedomizer Radio Network, but the Freedomizer website is compromised, so we just go directly onto Blog Talk Radio for the chat room. And I'll catch you guys another time. Thanks for listening. Bye.